Oh, someone is going to die, but it won't be Duncan Ryder. Read me the note again. An apology sat on the tip of his tongue when Winthrop flinched at his words, but Thorn swallowed it. Thorn's first purse fights were held far from the tumult and notoriety of the London auditoriums of his later career. His second ever bout took place in a muddy field halfway between Leicester and Peterborough. He'd ended the match being beaten bloody by a giant of a man named Dubbers. First or last name, Thorn never learned, but Dubbers was a creative bastard. After toying with him for the last few minutes of the fight, he'd gotten Thorn in a brutal hold and jabbed his elbow directly into Thorn's throat. Since then, Thorn's voice could be described as rasping on a good day. When he was irritated, it sounded like two pieces of rusted iron rubbing against each other. Right now, Thorn was irritated. A sheaf of auburn hair flopping over his forehead, Winthrop glanced at the note that had been delivered to the office a half hour earlier. With a hairless chin, wide blue eyes, and pale skin that stained red with every strong emotion, he appeared much more youthful than his 20 years. Having been born female, he would never grow a beard and was fated to appear forever young. Not always a bad thing when it came to being a private agent. Dear Winthrop, the young man read again, I appreciate your advice yesterday to check with the patent office before making accusations about Mr. Ryder. Winthrop continued, I am in dire need of funds, however, and cannot wait to bring my formula to market. If I do not bring you proof of his theft by tomorrow morning, it means I was wrong or I was caught. If the latter, please bring my sister Julia to Newgate with money for bribes and some cake, as I will no doubt be hungry by then. With fondest regards, what was she thinking? Thorn interjected. Winthrop shrugged as he set down the note. Miss Peterson does enjoy a nice peek as his cheeks flushed at Thorn's scowl. Well, she weren't too pleased that we said to wait. I suppose she's thinking to take matters into her own hands. Thorn suppressed a wince as he rose from his chair. The damp, chilly autumn air ravaged his old injuries. Each year, the onset of winter brought a rediscovery of wounds he'd have barely noticed 20 years ago. He walked to the window of the same room in which Miss Peterson had sat yesterday, expressionless, as Thorn explained that Tierney's agents most certainly did not engage in assassinations and could accept cases only where the life or livelihood of the person was at stake. Miss Peterson's lips had thinned to the point where they nearly disappeared, and the delicate wings of her brows pulled together to meet at a deep wrinkle at the bridge of her nose. She hadn't argued, however, simply bid them both a good day and left without another word. Thorn, like a fool, had brushed aside Winthrop's worries, confident that a woman smart enough to run a business would take his advice and be practical. Obviously, these women scientists were cut from a different cloth. Take matters into her own hands, Thorn echoed, meaning, well, if she's worried about being taken to Newgate, she must be considering sneaking into Ryder's office and getting back her. Thorn had grabbed his hat and was out the door before Winthrop could finish that sentence. The impulse made less and less sense as a fine drizzle of cold rain crept beneath the collar of Thorn's greatcoat and ran in tiny rivulets from the cupped brim of his wool top hat as he trudged through the murky dusk, as there were no hacks to be found in this kind of weather, the kind of weather that seeps in through a man's boot soles and causes a throbbing ache in his misused joints. How much worse would he feel if he hadn't quit drinking and fighting at the tender age of 28? As he turned a corner into a narrow alley, the unhappy conjecture slid from his brain to be replaced with bewilderment and a hefty dose of exasperation. They do not allow gifts of cake for prisoners at Newgate, Thorn informed Miss Peterson, or rather he informed her arse, which stuck out of a second floor window above his head. Miss Peterson's legs stopped kicking, and she hung there, limp, half her body wedged in the window, the other half growing wetter by the second. There was a small hole in one of her boots, and the sight struck Thorn in that soft place in his chest that most days he could ignore. Today was not one of those days. Of course, you can't be sent to Newgate if you haven't committed a crime, Thorn continued. For a moment, there was no reaction. Then Miss Peterson's left ankle turned in a circle as if to say, "Go on." From the crates overturned right here, I would guess that you made a tower and climbed up to get to that window, found yourself stuck, and accidentally knocked over your means of escape. Miss Peterson's left foot tapped the side of the building twice. Aha. If I were to stack the crates again beneath you, would you please climb down here so that we can speak face to face? He asked. Miss Peterson's left foot hung motionless for a moment, then slowly moved side to side. Is it the speaking face to face you wish to decline? He asked. The foot moved side to side again. You're well stuck, aren't you? Miss Peterson's left foot tapped the building in a grumpy manner, if a foot could be said to be grumpy. She smelled like eucalyptus and chamomile. The combination struck Thorn as both comforting and odd as it filled his nose once he'd rebuilt a tower of barrels and crates and stood behind her rounded arse. I'm going to put my hands around your waist, he said to the back of her. When I pull, suck in your stomach and push with your arms against the wall in there if you can. Miss Peterson's foot tapped in agreement, and Thorn bent over her. She'd worn a dull gray pelisse for her crime spree, and the odor of damp wool competed with the eucalyptus as he wrapped his arm around her waist. He'd not touched a woman in 7 years. Miss Peterson's beauty had nothing to do with the pang of longing that clawed at his gut. It was simply the soft curve of her warm body beneath him. How he'd missed holding a woman. Thorn left off his foolish pining and braced himself against the bricks as Miss Peterson's ankle spun in rapid circles. On the count of 3, I will pull, he warned her. 1, 2, 3. Oh, for the love of God, how did you get yourself so stuck? Miss Peterson's feet scrambled for the walls, and Thorn helped her find purchase. After a terrifying moment where he considered having to push her into the room, he heard a quiet squeal, and he felt some give. That's it, he coaxed. Reaching under her, Thorn prayed he wouldn't grab her bosom by accident as he eased her torso out, careful not to squeeze too hard. With scarcely any room on the crate beneath them, there was no place for her bottom to go but right up against the front of him. And Thorn scrabbled for the mild outrage he felt upon seeing her sticking out at the side of the building. When the back of her head finally emerged from the window, he breathed a sigh of relief. There now, he crooned. We'll just get you down from here. And oblivious to their precarious perch, Miss Peterson whirled around and threw her arms around Thorn's chest, her head coming only to his chin, her carpet bag in her hand, smacking him in the back and nearly knocking them both 2 stories down to the ground. I knew someone would come, she said. Leaning back from her surprise embrace, she peered up at Thorn with a radiant smile. The rain, his aches, the ridiculousness of him standing on top of a pile of crates to pull this strange woman out of a window, any combination of these would have put him in the foulest of moods. If he were honest, however, Thorn would later admit it had been her smile that gave him the most pause. Her smile revealed 2 top teeth overlapping ever so slightly, a flaw that turned her remote, ethereal beauty into something more, something human and attainable. Glowing with a combination of relief and gratitude, she gave off a warmth that made him want to set his hands to her face. Thorn tried to convince himself he didn't want to touch Miss Peterson in particular. He simply wanted to touch someone else, anyone else, and find in that moment a flesh against flesh, a place of recompense, a promise of forgiveness, a warmth that eluded him on the coldest part of the night. It took him far too long to break her hold. After tonight, Thorn wanted nothing more to do with women scientists, Miss Peterson in particular.